It was only recently that the letter A was added to the LGBT plus alphabet, and even then it was attributed to two completely different groups, asexuals and allies. It seems that as a society we are slowly working our way down the letters of the alphabet, the rainbow alphabet, in terms of trying to educate and foster public understanding. I have with me here today several members of an organization called ACE Los Angeles. ACE is an abbreviated term for asexual, and ACE Los Angeles is a meetup and outreach group for asexuals in Southern California. Hi, everybody. So first I'm going to introduce each of our guests, and then we'll hear from them after a quick overview of asexuality and some of the terms used to describe the various sub-identities. So don't be thrown off when I'm going to state their identity, the way they identify themselves when I introduce them, and later we will be explaining, and they'll be explaining exactly what that means. So first, Beth Damiano, did I say that right? Did I get it right?
You did.
Good. She is biromantic and gray asexual and is very tuned into the representation of asexuals in the media. So we'll get to her take on that when we talk to her. Gina Gomez is panromantic demisexual, which means she can be sexually attracted to anyone as she forms a deep emotional bond with them. And she has a very recent coming out story that I'm dying to hear. Shane Cricket is bi-oriented and fray-romantic. He often describes himself as aromantic because fray-romantic, which he truly identifies as, can be difficult for people to understand, but we are going to try. And then Tiffany Alice is heteroromantic demisexual, which means she's attracted to men and doesn't feel a sexual attraction unless there is a deep emotional bond. But I'm betting that maybe it's a bit more complicated than that. But we'll dive into that when we talk to her. So I wanted to now go over some of the terms quickly. This is from WebMD. Asexual is the lack of sexual attraction to others or low interest in sexual activity. Some people consider asexuality to be their sexual orientation, and others describe it as an absence of sexual orientation. Asexual can also be an umbrella term that includes a wide spectrum of asexual sub-identities such as demisexual, gray A, queer platonic, and many others. Asexual people may identify as cisgender, non-binary, transgender, or any other gender, and it's common for asexual people to have romantic but not sexual attractions to others. But when I read that, I know that we're going to hear comments about there are gray areas. It's not black and white. They may identify as hetero, homo, bi, or panromantic. Others are aromantic, which basically mean they feel no romantic attraction to other people. That is, that's a lot of terms, and frankly, I heard many of those terms, or I had never heard of most of those terms until I did the research for this interview. So there's a lot of education, I'm sure, to be had for both myself and hopefully the other viewers that are watching now. Before I speak to you individually about your experiences, I have a few lightning round group questions for you. And if you want to pass on a question, that's fine. So I'll call on you individually and ask you to come up with a quick answer. First question, when did you realize that you were asexual and what brought you to that realization? How about Beth?
So I was about 26 or so, and I saw a post on Tumblr, of course. I knew about asexuality because a very dear friend of mine had come out as asexual, but I did not know there was a spectrum for asexuality. And when I read about the spectrum and I saw the term gray asexual, that was kind of like the aha moment, the realization for me.
Okay, and how about Shane? We'll call on him next.
I discovered I was asexual in 2018, mostly through Google searches and honestly mostly through OkCupid, seeing a lot of those terms and through with other people and identities and researching it more and more. And I came out as aromantic or fray-romantic about a year and a half ago.
Okay, Gina.
So very much like Beth, I was in the BBC Sherlock fandom in Tumblr, and a lot of people said that Sherlock was asexual or demisexual, and that was the first time I ever heard that phrase. I didn't really identify with it until years later when I saw Bojack Horseman, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, that's when I first heard about the terms is representation in media, which is really important.
And I think Tiffany's the last one, right?
Yeah, that's me. Well, I always knew that I was different from a very young age, and I just thought that I was kind of broken because I didn't want a boyfriend. I didn't want to talk about sex, think about sex, any of that stuff. And then when I was in grad school in San Francisco, when I was 24, it was during the summer, during Pride, and I started seeing flyers and different things about asexuality. And I was like, what's this? And then I went on to Avon. I learned more. For a couple of years, I thought I was gray asexual. And then I realized that I was heteromantic demisexual probably maybe 2 years ago.
Next question I have is, what would you say is the most difficult or most misunderstood part about being asexual? I can see, as a gay man, I can see how some would think maybe you hadn't. In the case of gay men, they'll say, "Oh, you haven't found the right woman," or there was some kind of childhood experience, like your father left you or your mother. They have all of these different scenarios to explain why you're gay, other than you just are. So I'm curious, what's the most difficult or most misunderstood part about being asexual? Gina.
Yeah, I think, and I understand it, but no one wants to ask about it. People think they know what it is, so they don't even bother delving into it. And I get it. I was there as well. But that's why I think it's so great that we're having this interview, because the more education that's out there, the better.
Tiffany?
I think for me, definitely in my life, it's been the explaining part once someone does ask, because it's not something that people just understand. Like if you say, I'm gay or I'm a lesbian, people get that. If you say I'm asexual, they don't really get it. They think you're sick or you haven't met the right person or these other things. And it can sometimes be a very laborious task to explain exactly what your sexual identity is and what it means.
I can definitely see that. Shane?
For me, it's definitely that often I feel like people don't believe me. Like it's going to change later. It's just a phase or something like that. And also the other hardest part about with being asexual is that I often feel a whole different kind of being left out in men's spaces, considering what an over-sexualized society that we have. So yeah, just a lot of not fitting in certain spaces, because I am a part of the LGBT community in several different ways, but being asexual has caused me to be and feel kind of outcast in that in a lot of ways, because there's just not very much representation or education about it.
Beth?
I think one of the more misunderstood things is that there's a difference between your romantic attraction and sexual attraction. Because for most people, those things line up. So they never really think about it. They never think there's a difference. But for asexual people, sometimes they don't. Like, I'm biromantic, so I get crushes on all the people all the time. But I'm gray asexual, so the likelihood I would want to have sex with any of those people that I find cute and adorable, very, very low, so low to be non-existent, basically. Yeah, the difference between sexual attraction and romantic attraction, I think, is very misunderstood.
So the next question I have is, have you felt, and some of you kind of talked about this a little bit, have you felt the need to come out to friends and family as asexual? Because I forget which one of you said this, but it's not a topic that necessarily. I think when you're gay or straight, maybe it's a little more in your it's, I think the conversation, I could be wrong, but like with me, there'll be conversations with, colleagues at work. They'll be saying, are you married? Do you have kids? How's your wife? Or do you have a wife? And it can be very awkward where maybe, you don't necessarily have to maybe address that kind of topic with the people who you weren't really close to. So back to the question, have you felt the need to come out to friends and family? Shane, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I absolutely feel the need to come out about it. I mean, just like for some people that being gay or lesbian is a really important part of their identity or even community, like I feel that way about asexuality. It is very much incorporated into who I am. And I actually recently kind of came out to my dad just a few weeks ago. And it's usually not so much of a big surprise or talk because people don't really get it. Or they're like, congrats, you don't have sexual attraction. So it's kind of a weird, different coming out experience. But I do feel it's important. And I think advocating for ourselves is very important too.
Gina?
Yeah, so I'm in my early 30s, just realized I was in the A spectrum probably a year ago. So it's been a journey. And I'm in Florida vacationing, and I wanted to tell my mom in person. So I finally told her a few days ago. And very much like Shane, I don't think people get it. And I feel like it's important to come out because so many people ask you, especially my age, like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Okay, if not a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend? Are you going to get married? Are you going to have kids? And you can be ace and definitely have any of those things, but you can also be ace and not have any of those things. And I just think it's really important to let people know, that way they don't come into conversations just expecting you to be obsessed with sex or to be with someone. So yeah, I think it's really important. And if you haven't come out, that's totally okay. Like me, it's taken me more than 30 years. So
Tiffany.
Yeah, so here in California, I am very open with coworkers, friends, everyone that I meet. If it comes up organically, or if someone tries to set me up on a date or something, I'm like, oh, I'm asexual, so maybe I'm gonna pass. But I was born and raised in North Carolina, and my family started getting on my case about getting married and having kids when I was 16. And so it's been a little harder. I'm not really out with my family yet, though I do plan to come out to them the next time that I visit home. I'm going to show them a clip from Sex Education where they deal with this topic, and I might even show them this interview as well. Though with my younger brother and my nieces and nephews, I'm out with them and they all know. But kids are smarter than adults, so I felt safe coming out to them.
Beth?
So I came out as bisexual when I was about 15, and I am very lucky that I have a very supportive mom and brother. My family really backed me up, and I became very involved in activism because of that, because I knew I had their support. And so when I had to have my second coming out, pretty much a decade later, I did have to, start by defining terms. But I'm very open because I'm one of those people who's okay with educating and okay with being like, you're going to ask me the same question 700 times that 700 other people have asked me last time I came out to them. I'm going to tell you. So I'm very open about it, obviously, doing an interview like this.
I'm surprised, a lot of you are just now coming out to family, to certain members. So that's interesting that we'll have some, maybe we'll do a follow-up. maybe we'll do a follow-up interview in a month or two and see how that goes. So I'd be interested in hearing from each of you about your specific experiences, like how you identify, the terms and what in your case, what they mean, and what your feelings are. So a little bit deeper dive this time into you personally and your experiences. So let's start out with Tiffany.
Okay, so I am heteromantic, which means that I am romantically attracted to men. I get crushes, things like that. But for the most part, in my mind, I'm thinking about, I'd like to hold that person's hand, or I'd like to hang out with that person. That's where my mind goes. And then I am demisexual, which means that I can feel sexual attraction if I have a deep emotional connection. And as I said, originally, I thought I was a gray asexual, because it hadn't ever really happened. But then as I started to explore more and learn more about the community, I realized that there had been a few occasions where I had become sexually attracted to male friends. And I didn't know why at the time. It really confused me. And now I know it's just because when you're friends with someone, you can form that deep connection. And just for me, that means that possibly those sexual feelings can pop up after that.
Yeah, so
makes for very awkward friendships.
Yeah, I think your situation is interesting. Like how, because you can be sexually attracted in some cases to a person, when do you decide to define yourself as asexual versus just not very sexual? You know what I mean?
Well, like I said before, I always knew that I was different. And even when I was younger, when I had one sexual attraction towards a friend, I never acted on it because, one, it confused me, and two, I knew I didn't want to have sex. And, it just was a complex mash of emotions and feelings that I didn't have any terms to define then. And I'd say after that instance, it didn't happen with another friend for maybe 10 years or so. So it was quite a long gap. That's why originally when I started discovering asexuality, I was like, this is me. I do want to have a romantic relationship, but I don't necessarily want to have a sexual relationship. I thought I was gray asexual because it had only happened twice. But then as I learned that asexuality is this big spectrum and started diving into the individual pieces more, then I realized, okay, the reason why I could feel this sexual attraction towards these friends is because I am demisexual and because I had a deep relationship with them. So that's kind of how I came to the realization about myself. But it is different for everyone.
Okay, Beth, why don't you go to, let's hear from you.
So for biromantic, that means that I can feel romantic attraction to guys, gals, and be pals. The gray asexual is, I've defined it as feeling sexual attraction once in a blue moon, or more specifically, it seems like once every 5 years, I get a small allotment of sexual attraction that I will then feel sprinkled throughout those 5 years. I don't identify as demisexual because I can feel that sexual attraction for someone that I don't know particularly well and don't have an emotional bond with. But that happens so rarely because gray asexual is the rare. Sexual attraction is rare. It's not non-existent as with true asexuality. It is just not going to happen a whole bunch.
Okay, got it. So it's kind of similar. I'm seeing some similarities here. I think the grayness is something that is, I mean, I always knew everything. There's always gray with everything. Nothing I don't think is black and white. So the same question kind of for you is defining yourself as asexual. It's really largely is when it comes to relationships, you kind of have to, in a way, right? Does that make sense? And is that kind of what drives you to say I'm not sexual?
I'd been in relationships and I'd been in love and I'd felt those feelings, And I would have sex with people because that's the next logical step in a relationship, we're told by basically everything. But then I didn't feel a sexual attraction to them. And I realized that the variable in all of this was me. It was not the people I was with who some I was in love with and thought they were super gorgeous. The variable was me. And so that's why I started, again, it was that kind of feeling of there's something wrong or there's something broken. But when I started researching and I found the asexual spectrum and I hit upon gray asexuality, it's like, okay, that's me. Because it's not that I never feel sexual attraction, but it's just so rare that it seems like an anomaly. So finding and getting the definition of gray asexuality was that aha moment, was just like, oh, there's a word for this.
And the comment about you had to have a deep emotional bond, I think that was Tiffany maybe that said that.
Yes.
We wish, many of us wish we all could be that way, and that's more what the norm should be, right? But especially men, it'll be interesting to talk to Shane. But Gina, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so the panromantic part, I thought I was straight until I was about 23 years old. But I remember 10 years ago, I told my mom, I literally told her, Mom, I have never really wanted to sleep with anyone unless I form a deep connection with them. And if I knew that's what demisexual meant, that would have caused so many years of my life to be a lot happier. But then probably around 8 years ago, I started realizing that I was starting to like women as well, which was an insane realization. But then I started realizing, wait, I only like women that I have a deep connection to. So I started seeing a pattern. So that's why I identify as pan-romantic. I don't mind if they're a girl, a guy, trans, non-binary, anything. And I realize pan-romantic and biromantic are very similar. They're honestly in the same umbrella. I personally like saying pan-romantic just to show more people that like pansexual and panromantic people exist. But yeah, and then demisexual, again, I had no idea there was a term for it. And once I found that out, because that's what was confusing. I was like, well, I have sexual feelings sometimes, so I can't be asexual. But then the second I started researching it, I was like, oh, panromantic demisexual, that is me in a nutshell. And it's so freeing just being educated. And I think that's what all of us in this panel want to do, is just educate people, because think about how many people will be happier if they find out about these terms way faster than any of us did.
Makes sense. Shane, I just wanted to mention that when I first approached ACE for candidates to do these interviews, all of the respondents, they reached out and asked members, and all of the respondents were female. So fortunately we got Shane to come in and be with us. But I if you could kind of talk a little about that, the male, or do there tend to be more males? Just kind of your take on that. If you could kind of add that into the mix when you're talking about yourself and your experience.
Yeah, so I'll first go into talking about my romantic orientation, which I am on the aromantic spectrum. I do not experience any romantic attraction, feelings, crushes like that. I never have. But the term phraromantic means it's basically the opposite of demi. So I will become romantically attracted to somebody until I get to know them, which can kind of sound shallow, but with some more, talking and getting to know somebody, it's really not. It's just that getting to know somebody, and I guess that almost honeymooning phase where it's really, really exciting to get to know somebody and them know you. And then, when a romantic relationship starts to develop, I'm like, oh, this is actually real. Oh no, actually I really don't like this. I don't want to sign up for this at all, which has honestly gotten me into a lot of trouble in relationships and was incredibly confusing. I still say bi because I have altruist attraction to men and women, non-binary people. You know, I have eyes. I'm not blind. So, and then so that's my romantic orientation. I'm totally okay with just calling myself a romantic because that still fits the script. And with my sexuality, as I'm just flat out asexual, I experience no sexual attraction to any gender whatsoever. I never have, and that has been incredibly confusing to figure out because most of my life I was willing to have sex, even though I didn't like it, and I really just thought that everybody was lying and pretending to be cool, that we all liked sex. And especially with amongst men too, you know, I kind of thought we all had this kind of like, actually we'd rather not. And, you know, over time I figured out that that's not the case. And also with asexuality, what gets confused a lot, and I think especially with men, and why more tend to be quiet or not as visible, is that, or not even, you know, a lot of us have found asexuality through doing research or hearing it through something, and that does not tend to float around as much in men's spaces, because also libido does not equal sexuality. What you do by yourself in your bedroom does not equal your sexuality. You can have a high libido, you can enjoy masturbating and still have zero sexual attraction for other people. And that gets confused. People are like, oh, well, I still like to, you know, have a private time in my bedroom, so I'm not asexual. But that's not the case.
I was going to ask that question. I was going to ask that question.
Some asexuals have no libido, and some asexuals have very high libido, but they still don't have any sexual attraction to any other genders, unless they're gray or demi. So that gets confused a lot, you know, and it's really important to decipher. So I think a lot of guys, they're like, well, I have a libido, so I can't be asexual or something like that. And there's just, you know, the whole thing of toxic masculinity is a high vibe in that, you know, to say I am asexual and I really would rather not have sex with anybody for the rest of my life ever is a very bizarre thing to say in men's spaces. It's usually they're like I feel sorry for you, or like you know, like maybe you could get something prescribed for that, you know. And that's so yeah, that's not the case. That's so not okay to even like say. So I think there are a lot of asexual men. I think they just are not exposed as much, or that information and resources aren't shown to them as much. But I actually started a Facebook group for asexual men. It's only been up and running for 2 months, and we're coming up on 400 members. So we're here, we're around. It's all people from all over the world, all different ages, all different romantic orientations. It's an incredible men's space. Honestly, I really love it.
So what's the name of the page? So that we can
it's just asexual men. And for anybody watching this, if you can't find it, it's just on Facebook. If you can't find it for whatever reason, you know, you have my permission to shoot me a Facebook message. My name is the one, Shane Cricket, shown on here. There's not too many Shane Crickets out there. So anybody can message me and I'll add them to the group if they need. Non-binary people and agender people are also welcome in the asexual men's group if they think that's fitting for them too.
So I'm curious what the other women, how you feel about men and asexuality. Have you met many in the group, or have you found that to be less common, or they're more closeted, or what's your feelings? Whichever one of you wants to talk first.
Okay,
I definitely think.
Or
good.
Gina can go. No, you go, Gina. You go.
See, I should have directed that. Sorry.
I definitely think they're more closeted. In a weird way, society works against women and men when it comes to asexuality. Women are supposed to be the ones that want to have a family and have children, and the only way to do that is to have sex. But then, like Shane was saying, men are pressured to have to be macho and overly sexual. So, and all the genders in between, no one really wins when it comes to finding out that they're asexual. So yeah, I think it's sad. It's society that makes men not want to come out or even realize it.
Tiffany?
For sure, I echo everything that Gina said. There's a great documentary called The Mask You Live In that kind of examines the toxic masculinity that is pushed, particularly in our culture, but all over the world. And I do have a personal friend who is a man and who is asexual. And I've known him for maybe 6 years. He doesn't publicly say that he is asexual. He's a martial artist. He's a bodybuilder. It's not something that he brings up because of this intense pressure on men to conform.
Beth, I don't know if you wanted to have anything to say. If not, that's fine too. If they covered it.
Before we had to shut down because of the pandemic, I went to most of our in-person meetings here in Los Angeles for ACELA, and there would be less, but there would still be, quite a few guys who would show up for our in-person meetings. One of them's a close friend of mine. There's others that would always be at the Monday night meetings, which are the ones that I co-host. So there are definitely asexual guys out there, but I agree with the others that there is this societal pressure that makes them not want to be as outspoken. They don't want to kind of come out to everybody because they're going to face even, maybe not more, but different issues than asexual women will face.
So the trans population has received a lot of exposure in recent years, both in the news, unfortunately, because of the murders and bullying that have taken place, but also in film and television as relatable characters, and that exposure has helped bring a much greater understanding of who they are. But until I reached out to you, all of you, asking about representations in the media, I couldn't think of one. I could not think of a single show where they were depicted. So I want to pull up this graphic. These are some of the shows that you mentioned where asexuals are represented. And actually, there's one personality there too, Yasmin Benoit. I don't know if I said her name correctly. But Beth, since I think you're kind of you're very in tune to the media, so I was wondering if you could kind of go down this list and kind of talk about these, and if you want to add anything, feel free.
So obviously one of the biggest one, the one that's got the most attention is Todd Chavez from Bojack Horseman, because what I thought was wonderful about it was we got to see Todd go through his journey. It wasn't just a announcement, he is asexual, or like in the character of Florence in Sex Education, this is how I feel. Oh, I'm asexual? Okay. And then you don't follow that too much. Todd, we saw him go to an asexual group. We saw him get a fellow asexual partner. And so Todd Chavez, for all that he is a cartoon character, is probably incredibly relatable and one of the most well-known asexual characters that has been on television or in movies or anything. Down to Shadowhunters. My group, and actually myself and one of my fellow ACELA members, we consulted with the production team for Shadowhunters because they wanted to make it very obvious that Raphael was ace. and they wanted to do it right. So they asked us a lot of questions, and we were able to help them figure out how to bring up his asexuality and how to balance that with the romantic side that he was going to have. Siren's voodoo, she's kind of depicted as like the weird one, which is kind of the stereotype you get with asexual characters. There's something a little off about them. But she's another one who had a romantic relationship, even though she was asexual. Emmerdale and Mask You Live In are ones I'm not as familiar with. I think Tiffany, I might be wrong there, brought them up. So I would throw over to her now.
Sure. So the Mask You Live In doesn't really deal with asexuality as much as it just deals with toxic masculinity. And it's kind of a lens that you can look at and see why there aren't more visible males in the asexual community. There is just a different sort of pressure on men, and not more, just different. And if you watch The Mask You Live In, you can kind of see that, and it will help you understand, why there aren't more men visible in our community. As far as Emmerdale goes, it is a soap opera that has been on forever. And a couple of years ago, a character, Liv Flaherty, came out as asexual, and it's really, really great because she had a big arc on the show, and I think 2016 is maybe when she came out, and her asexuality has been a continual plot point on the soap opera even up till today. So it's also shows her struggles, shows her trying to have a relationship with someone else, and of course it's all over the top because it's a soap opera, but it is a really great representation. And over here in America, we may not have seen the show, but for my friends that I have in the asexual community that are in the UK, it is a very big deal, and it was a great representation for them to see on television.
So I want to do a quick lightning round before we close. Name something that you feel is an advantage or a gift of being asexual. So, Gina?
Honestly, it's amazing that I'm not obsessed with sex. So in a way, I feel like I see the world differently than so many people. And I focus way more on the romantic side or the platonic side. So I care way more about family and harboring really good friendships. Nothing against people that aren't in the asexual community, but I think it's such a unique and beautiful way to see the world. And I'm a represented screenwriter, so I am definitely trying to write asexual characters as main characters, as characters in the huge part of the spectrum. So it's very important to me to show my unique viewpoint. And I actually really want to talk to all of you guys after this about that. But I definitely think just seeing the world differently. I used to think it was a bad thing, but now it's like a superpower.
How about Beth?
So for me, one of the things that I found in my asexual journey is learning the difference between the different types of attraction, because for so many people they line up, and so many people never think that there are differences. And so when I realized like I could get crushes on and think anybody's cute, but that doesn't necessarily mean I would want to have sex with them. And because there was a disconnect, it made me feel broken. Broken is something that a lot of people in the ace community, kind of how we describe ourselves before we find our terms. So for me, knowing that there's differences, and it kind of creates a richer picture of how I relate to other people and how I operate in the world. And I think for me, it's been really a great and wonderful thing.
Jane?
Yeah, I before I answer that, I quickly want to comment on representation, just because I want to advocate a little bit on visible asexual men, just really quickly. Is that the Asexual and Visibility and Education Network was founded by a man, David J., and also some other representation out there. Tim Gunn, who is a gay fashion consultant since the 80s, is asexual. He's gay and asexual. That's great. Also, Edward Gorey, who is an older children's book author, is also asexual. So just a few, other visible guys out there that are there too. And to answer your question about what's great and different about being asexual, for me, well, I am a lot of women's safe go-to friend that will never try to sleep with them. There's no drama there. I feel like my life is really drama-free compared to my other friends, considering I don't date since I'm aromantic too. Wow, my life has no drama about any of that at all. It's amazing and fantastic. And with being asexual, I feel like my time and a lot of my mental energy just goes to other places, things, and people than other people. I get to know people much deeper and faster, I feel like, since I don't have some strange sexual lust creeping around in my brain with people, I guess. And I like that. I like being that way.
Tiffany.
I echo a lot of what Shane and Gina said. For me, it is the focus. I do not know what I would do if my brain was filled with lust and these other things. I can't even comprehend it. But I know that without those things, I am really able to focus. So for a long time, I was focused on my education. I went to grad school, I did those things. Then I was focused on my career, moved out here to Los Angeles. I'm in the film industry. So I think the ability to apply more focus is a huge superpower. And it helps me really achieve my goals in ways that I don't think maybe I might not be able to if my brain was filled with all of these other things that I hear from my friends who are allosexual that they just are thinking all the time.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, I came out when I was in college, 19 years old, and went to UCLA Film School. And I would have done so much better. I would have been able to focus so much better if it, not only the sexual part, but the coming out part, just figuring out that you were gay on top of, the sexuality. I totally hear where you're coming from there. Before we close, I did want to ask you all for resources, recommended resources that people who are asexual think they might be asexual, have friends who they think could benefit. What resources would you recommend that they go to? I don't even know who to ask. Who's nodding the most? Shane?
Yeah. Oh man, I got a lot. I do go to LA, but I actually am currently living in San Diego. And for anybody in LA, Orange County, San Diego County, I just helped found the Asexual and Aromantic Support Group for San Diego's LGBTQ Center. That happens, meetings are twice every month. So that just was born about 6 months ago and will be regular. Another great resource is asexuality.org, which they call AVEN, which stands for the Asexual Visibility and Education Network. There's lots of definitions, terms, stories. There is also ARIA, that's for AUREA, which is aromanticism.org. Pretty much the same thing, but talking about aromanticism. I know this is a talk about asexuality, but aces and arrows have this shared commonality, right? Of a lack of, which is very different compared to everybody else. Another great book that people could read about asexuality is, I forget the title, but it's about asexuality, and it's by Angela Chen. beautifully done, very well written. And there's another great young adult fiction book called Loveless by Alice Oseman, and the main character is an asexual, aromantic character. It's about coming out, all of that. It's fantastic.
Oh, and I actually just got the book by Angela Chen, so I can tell you the title. It's Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex.
So, anybody else want to chime in with other resources?
Yeah, I can't wait to check out all of that, you guys. I'm also a moderator of a Facebook group called A Safe Ace Place. We have over 9,000 members. I think that was the first ACE group I ever joined, and it just made me feel so much better, like I wasn't crazy. So yeah, I feel like if you type ACE or asexuality in like the Facebook search or on Twitter, you'll start finding a community. So many Twitter pages, so many people on Twitter have it in their bios. So yeah, I think just finding an online community is really important.
I agree with that. And I would also add meetup.com, because AceLA, we are on Facebook. We are also on Meetup. Currently, we're doing virtual Meetup. We're very much hoping to go back to in-person Meetup when we can. You don't have to be in Los Angeles. You can just search for asexual groups on Meetup. And I think not everywhere, but a lot of places do have groups that you can kind of, find your support, find your community. Also, I can think of a couple of books with characters. One that's my absolute favorite that I'm like currently devouring is called Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. And it is an ace main character. And the first book in the Doorway series, Every Heart a Doorway, Nancy and that series is by Shauna McGuire. That first book focuses on an asexual character. So we've been getting, little bits of television, but you can also find the representation in books if you're a huge bookworm like I am.
Jane.
Last one. There is a movie coming out called Dear Luke, Love Me. It's being made in LA right now. And I think they're looking for some seed funders for it right now, but the two main characters are an asexual character and a demisexual character. So if you keep your ears out and keep doing that Google search for Dear Luke, Love Me for whenever that comes out, and there's a premiere for it too.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for taking the time out to talk to me. It's certainly been a lot to digest, and I've learned a lot during this discussion. And definitely, let's meet up again sometime in the future and talk about how things went with some of your comings out and other. All right. Until next time, we'll see you then.